Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tech Policy Grind. I'm Rima Musa, and I'm here with the lovely Lama Mohammed, and we're here to bring you some news in the world of tech policy before we get to the bulk of today's episode, which features Foundry Fellow Meri Baghdasaryan in conversation with the winners of the Foundry's annual hackathon policy competition. So, Lama, what's going on this week? How's it going with you?
Hey Rima, thanks again for having me. It's been an interesting week between aggressively refreshing 538 to see for what I hope would be the end of the midterm election results, but we're still waiting anticipantly. And between that and also making predictions to people at the office about what changes might happen to future cyber and tech legislation, just like anybody else would. What about you? What's going on?
Life is good. I just saw maybe like 5 minutes ago that Karen Bass was
Yes.
elected mayor of LA. So I am personally, uh, celebrating that.
Oh, wait, she's the first elected woman.
The first, yeah,
That's
that's
really exciting.
exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. But yeah, that's my win of the day.
Mhm.
But yeah, let's dig into some news.
And
So,
before we dive in, just a friendly reminder that the opinions, thoughts, and views expressed on this news segment do not reflect the institutions, organizations, and companies we are affiliated with. We are simply two emerging voices in the field that are attempting to make sense of the grand tech policy world. So, Rima, let's dive in. What is on top of your mind for this week?
so it's been a big week for big tech and for crypto. Starting off with big tech, we have Google,
Hmm.
which has just settled with 40 different state attorney generals for an amount of, I believe, just under 392 million
Hmm.
over allegations that Google was tracking people through their devices after a location tracking setting had been turned off.
Hmm.
Uh, so, really interesting to see here that this kind of mirrors cases that are brought under the FTC in the context of deceptive practices. And that language isn't uh, explicitly used here, in at least reporting on the settlement. But as a part of the deal, Google has committed to um, making changes to make their location tracking practices more transparent to users, and more clear and understandable, including potentially showing users information of what actually happens when they turn location tracking on or off.
Right. And I think this idea of enhanced transparency could be a really big win for both Google and consumers because that establishes social responsibility between the user and the company.
Yeah, and this is coming off the heels too of a lawsuit that Google settled with authorities in Arizona for $85 million, stemming from similar location tracking allegations. So it's again fascinating to see the state led approach here, and
For
how
sure.
that might continue to evolve from both the state and potentially federal response.
100%. So, switching gears a little bit, I think it's important to acknowledge that we are only halfway through the month of November and pretty close to the holidays. And it's really sad to see how November is still showing a really sharp increase in the tech layoffs. So far, Amazon is gearing up to lay about 10,000 employees, which I think is the largest reduction to its headcount in the company's history, according to the New York Times. Meta has already laid off half of its 23,000 firings in November. And other companies that have cut off staff include Twitter, Salesforce, Stripe, Lyft, Redfin, Opendoor, and Zendesk. What are your thoughts on what this might mean for the economy, Rima, or just largely in general?
Yeah, so there's been talk about a recession for
Right.
quite some time now, and I think, especially in how well tech was doing throughout the pandemic, we're kind of seeing
Yeah.
a little bit of a bubble burst.
Yeah.
So time will tell if there will be sort of like recalibration after these tech layoffs. And also, it's interesting to think about to what extent these layoffs may have been affected or merely correlative um, with Elon Musk's sort of surprise
Mm, mm,
firing of half of Twitter's employees. I'm really feeling a lot of empathy and compassion um, for those tech workers who have been
yeah.
laid off. Great people across uh, lots of different departments, from engineering to marketing to legal. And so we're seeing a huge
Mhm.
variety of people affected by this. But I'm, hoping for the great people I know who have been affected by this, that they get the support they need, that they
Right.
manage to land somewhere fantastic, um, and that this doesn't put too much of a damper on the end of 2022 and going into the holiday season
Yeah.
for them. So, sending out
Yeah.
good vibes to everyone who's been affected by this. It will get better, but yeah, it's really disheartening to see.
Yeah.
Um,
It's definitely super duper tough. But yes, echoing Rima, sending the best of vibes. The Internet Law and Policy Foundry has a phenomenal job board. We'll link it in the description. Please feel free to check it out and see if there are any opening roles. We are also happy to look around and reach out to us if you need anything. And sort of following the cycle of layoffs, I think it's also interesting to see how crypto has also seen big cuts this year. And I'm curious to see how this could continue or even increase in the wake of the FTX mayhem, which is what we will discuss next. So, this week we saw the collapse of the crypto exchange FTX after a surge of sudden withdrawals. The exchange is led by a man named Sam Bankman Fried, also known as SBF, one of the crypto industry's most well regarded figures. Until very recently, people saw FTX as well off, especially because the company was able to reach a 32 billion valuation and even started discussing acquisition plans on its own just this last week. This collapse started this very week when FTX suddenly suspended consumer withdrawals, and the CEO of Binance, which is FTX rival exchange, announced on Twitter that FTX had asked for help and a rescue deal had been reached. However, shortly following, the rival tweeted that the deal was completely off, citing the results of corporate due diligence and news of reporting mishandling of customer funds at FTX. So, really, the problems at FTX pretty much surfaced this week and last week, first starting with the report from Coindesk, which claimed to show the balance sheet of a sister company to FTX was choked up in billions of dollars in FTT crypto. And the issue with FTT crypto is that it cannot be readily turned back into cash. So if it's lost, it is lost. And not only that, but it's also been revealed that SBF, the CEO of FTX, has been using customer funds from the exchange to sort of plug into the losses of his failing crypto empire. So the question really now is what consequences will be for the CEO? Rima, do you want to kind of give us some insight or thoughts about what this could look like from the legal point of view? Who's in trouble here? Who's in danger? Is anyone going to prison? It's very spicy.
yeah, my answer is I don't know the answer, but a lot of people are talking about jail time. Um, and a lot
Mm,
of people are just talking about the notion that a lot of people are going to lose a ton of money from this. I've heard
hmm
stories of people who have put their entire life savings to
Right.
FTX and uh,
Tom Brady.
yeah, I mean it's a sad story.
Scary stuff is happening. Scary stuff.
Scary stuff indeed. But on the bright side, the Foundry is
Yeah.
still going strong. And now
Thank
we
goodness.
will turn it over to our fellow Foundry Fellow. I always love saying that. Fellow. Meri
So cute.
Baghdasaryan.
It's like a tongue twister.
Meri Baghdasaryan, who is going to chat with our winners from our latest policy hackathon. So hope you enjoy, and we'll catch you next time.
Today, I have the pleasure to interview representatives of 3 winning teams of Foundry's 3rd annual Policy Hackathon. This year, the hackathon's theme was Trust, Safety, and Privacy in the Metaverse. The participants were tasked with pitching a proposal that will address some of privacy, trust, and safety challenges in the immersive technology space. Hi, Tom, Mana, and Raktima. First off, congrats on your impressive proposals in frames of the hackathon, and welcome to Tech Policy Grind. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for having us. This is exciting.
Hi, Mary. Thank you for having us. It's very exciting to be here and talk about this with all of you.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining. So before we discuss your proposals, we thought it would be interesting to our listeners to have a sneak peek into a policy hackathon experience and try to understand what it is like and how it was for you. So let's start with Mana. We are curious to hear your impressions or reflections from the hackathon experience.
Yeah, happy to speak about it. So I've participated in smaller, shorter hackathons before, but this was the first time that it spanned over a couple of days. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was what a learning opportunity it was. I really felt myself deeply immersed in the whole experience, both in terms of the subject matter, but also in terms of working with folks from different countries and different backgrounds and skill sets. And I thought that was very, just like a really great, fun experience. And I think the biggest sort of takeaway for me was these subjects they may be very technical. They may seem, for people who are not working in this space, kind of like out of reach, but it just, by the end of it, I remember reflecting that like it is so important that all of us feel like we have a place a place in this dialogue and in these discussions because they affect all of us. And yeah, that would be my biggest kind of memorable moment of the post hackathon reflection.
Thank you for sharing that, Mana. I agree that it is always great to, for everyone to join and share their perspective because we're all impacted by these technologies, and having everyone's, views included is a crucial part of the process. Let's go next to Raktima. How was your experience? Maybe share more about your thought process for your proposal and the research and whatnot.
Hi, thanks.
I can
So,
defer to you.
so unlike Mana, I had actually not participated in a policy hackathon or any kind of hackathon before. And by way of background, I'm a privacy lawyer based out of India, and I'm just at Georgetown doing my LLM. And I think most hackathons tend to be sort of more focused on um, technical solutions, and I honestly have not had the opportunity to participate in something that actually gives you an opportunity to think about laws and policies and technical aspects in an intertwined manner. In that sense, as a lawyer, it was a very interesting experience for me. I definitely felt like, and I was working in a one-person team. I actually felt like, okay, maybe having some engineers on board would have been interesting, etc. But I actually, eventually, once I got to the end of it, I realized that the world that we are moving towards, it's increasingly not the kind of world where you only have a specific category of people coming up with solutions. You definitely need all sorts of expertise. So I think that was my biggest takeaway when I was thinking this through. I was not just thinking about what the actual solution would be, but also who would the stakeholders be, how would they interact with each other, what would their incentives be. And that is where the general experience of knowing how these global actors tend to interact as a lawyer came in very useful. So I think that way it was very exciting for me to think those things through.
Thanks for sharing that, Raktima. I agree that I think the world is becoming quite interdisciplinary, and we see that in multiple discussions across the board. Moving to Tom, what was your experience like? Was it intense? How was it to work with people and think about this newer types of issues?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary. So basically, I would start by saying that this is also my first hackathon experience, and being that it's on a topic that is still emerging, like the metaverse, and it was quite engaging, although it was tasking at the same time, being a student, and I think we were all students in my team, and we're all Nigerians, and yeah, so it was quite a lot for us. We had to work all night most of the times because we're engaged in academic activities. But overall, I would say it was a very wonderful experience for me. I got to delve deep into the metaverse, what the legal challenges are, and all of that. So yeah, kudos to the organizers of the event. I learned a lot actually. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And it's interesting that we have, Amana who participated in other hackathons before, and Tom and Raktima, for you, it was for the first time. But we hope it was an intense but also rewarding experience. So now I guess we will move to the main topic of today's podcast, which is discussion around your proposals. So the topic of the metaverse and the issues in the metaverse is quite new and emerging, and we don't really live in a metaverse, so thinking of these issues is crucial but also challenging because we don't know what everything will look like. So I'm really curious to hear your proposals and have you share it with our audience, because I think you you give us a lot of food for thought in this space. So let's start with Tom's team, who ended up taking the third place in the Policy Hackathon competition. So Tom, share with us what was your issue area and what solutions did you propose?
All right, thank you very much, Mary, once again. Um, um, like I said, the metaverse is quite an engaging topic to engage in. So basically, we were tasked with coming up with policy solutions as to address issues of privacy, trust, and safety in the metaverse. But then we had to streamline our problem to the problem of anonymity in the metaverse. Users can perpetrate crime without being traced. So we address the issue of anonymity, and to provide solutions for this, we proposed that metaverse platforms carry out verification, KYCs on all their users, such that whatever crime that is perpetrated by these users would be addressed and tracked down.
Thank you, Tom. I'm curious if Raktima or Mana have any reflections or reactions to Tom's team's proposal.
I thought it was really interesting how all of us, I had a chance to look at all of our proposals, the videos that you sent out, Mary. It's very interesting that all of us sort of picked some version of identity verification. Like my proposal was on age verification. I think mine was on child safety, and all of us sort of picked this along proposals, very different solutions, but identified problems that are in a way very similar, which is that we don't know who we are interacting with in in the metaverse, and as a result, some groups of people are more at risk than others, and then how do we address that particular issue? So yeah, that's something that I thought was interesting and indicative of what our more prominent challenges are going to be going forward into the future.
Yeah, I mean, as you already have the floor, let's just jump into your proposal. Especially, I'm curious to hear your perspective as a privacy attorney.
Yeah, so the challenge as a privacy attorney was, of course, that as much as I would love to say that, you know, it, I mean, my proposal was essentially about age verification and child safety in the metaverse. And it was more about coming up with an industry protocol that allows information to be exchanged safely, but also in a private way. So I was hesitant to suggest anything that involves an individual sharing their ID with a particular company for the purpose of making sure that people are who they say they are, because there are certain pitfalls with that, right? I mean, the right to anonymity is something that we have often recognized as the cornerstone of free speech on the internet. And when it comes to minor safety, there are two sides to the story. On one hand, miners are subject to so much more invasive risks within the metaverse that a lot of people would say, okay, I mean, forget about anonymity. It's so much more important to keep kids safe that we can just let go of that. But at the same time, I also remember being a child on the internet at one point of time, growing up in a very conservative country in India. And anonymity is also critical to the safety of children, especially children who are, queer children or children who belong to a religious minority background, etc. For them to thrive on the internet, it's also important for them to have anonymity. So with that as the background, my solution sort of focused on how to identify when people, may be misrepresenting their age, and then move on to like it, collect a few signals from across activities of people, and then increase people who display contradictory signals to increased scrutiny about what their identification might be. And it sort of draws on um, certain things that are happening currently both in India in the financial sector, and also actual companies like Instagram, for example, have partnered with a lot of companies that do this sort of age verification without information being shared with that company. So in this proposal, I had sort of posed as an industry body that is proposing a solution with their membership, and there is a third party which sort of is specialized in this kind of age verification stuff. And um, I suggested a certain protocol for data sharing that allows information to be shared across um, different categories of companies based on activities and interactions that have taken place with those companies, without sharing actual identity card or information with any particular company. So, of course, it's a big-ish proposal and really hard to summarize all of it here, but that was the general idea of it. I would say, though, that even while drafting this, I realized that there are like many issues with this. This is not an easy problem to solve at all. I looked into some, uh, zero knowledge proof and those kinds of concepts that are being successfully used in different contexts, even in India. But none of them are absolute solutions to the kind of problems that we are facing, and that is something that I just want to highlight as something that I'm very aware of. And going forward, we need to keep that in mind, that this is something that can only we just need a lot more work done in this area for this to work.
We definitely did not give any of you very easy issues, and I'm really impressed that we had so many great proposals, and the three proposals that we are discussing today were the best of the best. So finally, we go to Mana's team, who ended up being the winner of this year's Policy Hackathon. So Mana, walk us through your proposal and your thought process.
Yeah, would be happy to. So, I guess a little bit of context or chronological history of how the weekend unfolded for us. The team comprised of pretty diverse background, like I mentioned earlier. We had policy folks, we had members who were very familiar with like international advocacy issues, and also one of our members is a part of works for a gaming company. So, with this like diverse background, it was interesting that quite early on, I would say within the first few hours of the hackathon, we all decided and agreed that we wanted to focus on some sort of a proposal that would improve the well-being and safety of youth and minors on the internet. But that was the easy part, and everything that followed was sort of the interesting components of the challenge. So we initially had decided that we take kind of like a more hard tool approach. We would maybe require by law that companies come up with some sort of a safety guidelines tool or best practices by a certain date, and there would be kind of like uh, you know uh, they'd be held accountable through that approach. But halfway through, we got feedback on our proposals, and we decided that maybe we wanted to think about this issue in a different way than usually these topics have been approached to date, and maybe think a little bit more about what work is already being done in this space and where the gaps are, and how our policy or our proposal could help to fill those gaps. With that, we landed on taking a little bit more of a grassroots approach, because we decided that, to date, both with regards to issues at the metaverse, but also other technological innovations, it tends to be, the companies, the experts, the lawmakers and policymakers who are at the forefront of these conversations. But what really is often missing is the perspectives and voices of the people who are directly impacted by these issues. Given that we wanted to focus on children and minors, we decided to target our proposal to the parents, because they're the ones who play such an integral role at protecting and educating them on best practices and safe practices online. So our proposed approach was two-pronged. The first was to develop a guidelines on best practices for minors and parents to inform them about safe participation in the metaverse. And then there would be different components or sections to this guidelines, from physical safety to just education and informative discussions, cybersecurity, uh, and whatnot. And then the second part would be a little bit more about, okay, now we kind of have this information here. How do we make sure that the right people are thinking about this? Are they aware of this? And they're basically motivated to include themselves in these conversations. So that second part was to partner with some sort of an existing initiative or organization, such as the XR Child Safety Initiative, to develop community workshops and educational campaigns to increase knowledge and motivate parents to get involved in the decision making around the future of the metaverse and how their minors are participating in this realm. I guess a little bit more detail on the initiative or the community workshops and educational campaigns would be that these would be in partnership with civic organizations all across the states, and they would involve some sort of a kind of educational half of the sort of facilitation workshops, but also make sure we're leaving room for genuine participatory involvement and discussions as to how the participants believe the guidelines should evolve over the years. And yeah, that was sort of how we thought about this. We wanted it to be a grassroots, way of thinking about this, but we also wanted to be a living, kind of evolving solution. Like others have mentioned already, we acknowledge that this is a massive subject, and there's different ways to improve safety online, and it also will change, evolve constantly. It's not going to be set in stone. So we thought that kind of two-way feedback mechanism would help address that concern.
Thank you, Mana. I love the multi-stakeholder approach in your proposal, that you thought about all potential groups that need to be consulted, or groups that you need to cooperate with, including the rights holders, which, as we all know, are most of the times forgotten in this process. But I think it's an ingenious idea to have the parents involved in the process directly. So any reactions to the proposals from other teams? Would love to hear thoughts. I know that you all heard this during the presentations, but I'm curious if you have any further thoughts about these proposals.
I really appreciated what Raktima was mentioning about the importance of context in thinking through these problems. I think that definitely is something that came up for our group, whether it's the context of how different countries and, given their unique political, socio-economic kind of landscape, experience these issues, or maybe it's different communities, the LGBTQ community, different diverse groups within the same local landscape, how they might need different catered solutions, basically, when it comes to these getting involved in this conversation. I think that's really important and kind of speaks to what we were mentioning earlier about learning. I think Tom mentioned this, like learning about from previous experiences at the realm of like technology and how it's impacting society. So yeah, just wanted to really emphasize that.
Yeah, and I thought, Nana, your proposal was also very cool, and of course, congratulations on being the winning proposal. The the interesting thing that I thought about your proposal, and that's something that I was also trying to think through a lot, is that we can always think of ways that would work if everyone, was definitely operating in good faith. But the challenge of knowing that a lot of people sometimes do not necessarily operate, a lot of players and stakeholders do not necessarily operate 100% in good faith, and still sort of finding a way of incentivizing everyone to do what we were sort of proposing to do. That is something that I thought was really interesting, and that we all thought of different kinds of partnerships where competing goals and interests would keep people in check and keep the engine rolling on the proposals that we wanted, which I thought was very sort of a timely approach.
I cannot agree more. All issues that you raised in your proposals are, issues that the whole world is trying to come up with solutions for, and I think your proposals are definitely further food for thought, and you definitely put a lot of effort and good, intentions in your proposals. So I'm really curious to see where we will go in this space. And talking about this, emerging space, I would love to hear your perspective on, let's say, the broader, bigger future in the metaverse. So I think the question is, if you had a magic wand, how would you want the future in the metaverse to be? Are there any specific characteristics that you would love it to have, or some safeguards or whatnot? So I will give the floor to Tom to start us off.
So if I had a magic wand, I would propose that we have a space where anyone, I mean, if anyone, both the younger generation would be able to access and still be safe, right? So I propose that there should be a collective approach to the development of the metaverse. Like it should not just be restricted to the tech guys or the tech bros and techies or these metaverse platforms. The government should be heavily involved in terms of providing policy guidelines as what we are doing now, and also like get everybody involved, both the government, the private sector, the public sector, hear people's views as regards um, every aspect of the development of the metaverse. So with that, we'll definitely have a safe space, because if we allow the metaverse to run on its own and we allow it to be decided by the tech guys or the tech bros and tech Cs, we'll definitely be having a one-sided space, right? The government should be heavily involved in the metaverse, like in terms of providing regulations and, of course, tracking each feature that is being developed to be utilized in the metaverse. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I think multi-stakeholder approach is crucial for any process, including the metaverse. Let's go to Raktima next.
Yeah, I think when I think of a magic word, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, I used to be really into Isaac Asimov when I was a teenager, and there's the first book that I read by him is called The Naked Sun, which is a book that has somehow stayed with me. It's this situation where in sometime into the future where people just like practice physical distancing much before the pandemic happened, by the way, and they interact with each other largely through something that is similar to the metaverse, which is like hyper realistic sensory experiences where you can take a walk with somebody without that person actually being next to you. And I have always been like completely obsessed with that idea. Obviously, that obsession grew during the pandemic when physical distancing was an actual thing that we all had to practice. And now that I'm far away from home, like I'm in DC and my family's in India, I find myself going back to like returning to that idea. So it's an idea that I definitely find fascinating, that our interactions will be so immersive that distance will not feel the way it does today. But obviously, as a lawyer, policymaker, the way to do that while ensuring that everybody is also safe and comfortable is just seems like more of a challenge than it really should be. But hopefully, with all of us working together, we will be able to make our way to a future where that is the first thing that comes to our mind when we think of metaverse, instead of all of the stuff that's currently in the news, which is obviously not very encouraging. So yeah, here's to hoping for a more positive and fun future, because I think I'm still one of those people who believes in the early 90s promise of the internet, which was all like, this is going to change the world and we are all going to get connected and amazing things are going to happen. So yeah, I still kind of feel that way about everything, including the metaverse.
Thanks, Raktima. I love your enthusiasm and optimism, and let's hope that will be the future we will have. And finally, let's go to Mana.
I think when I think about a magic wand and how I would use it for this space is to get this subject a little bit like demystified for everybody involved. I think, I kind of want to take it back to like a basic, simple technological evolution, like the invention of the car, for example. So I think there's this sort of widespread understanding that there's like safe ways to operate a car. And if you do that, it can unlock a lot of opportunities for you. You can go really far with it. You can travel long distances. So I, completely appreciate, especially after this hackathon experience, the complexity of the issues that exist in this space. But I also would like for it to be a little bit more approachable to all people, so that we can kind of create that safe foundation and unlock the positive potentials of what this could mean for our society.
Thank you so much. I hope our listeners will get inspired from your vision and proposals, and also that will give them further food for thought and probably motivation to act in this space as well. And to close us off, I would love for you to share, a piece of advice for future participants of, Foundries or any other policy hackathon. The team at the Foundry is already starting the planning for next year's policy hackathon, and we would love to hear your advice to future participants? Let's start with Mana.
I think I have a couple of different thoughts to that. So the first thing would be to prepare in advance as much as you can about the subject matter and just get a familiarity of the issues and the organizations and the initiatives that already are doing work in this space so that your proposal could build off of that. The other piece is that the working across really different time zones can be a bit of a challenge. So thinking through that in advance, maybe with the organizers, is also another, kind of set you up for success. And lastly, it's, kind of meant to be a challenging experience. So think and have fun with it, be experimental. The reality is it's not common to be able to, in the workplace, for example, to get think so widely and so openly about these issues. So just really, enjoy the process.
Thank you so much, Mana. It reminded me of my favorite expression, which is lean into discomfort. I feel like this policy hackathon experience is definitely a chosen discomfort that people will enjoy more if they lean into it. Next, let's go to Tom.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary. So, one advice for next year's participants would be to be able to keep pace with the emerging trends out there, right? Like we know that the metaverse just recently got more persons got to know about the metaverse this year, especially in Africa, as it is. And then it's very important that everyone around the world, if you want to participate in something like this, you should be well versed with the trends and the recent issues.
Thank you, Tom. Definitely prepare before the hackathon. That will be super helpful, as Mana also mentioned. And last but not least, Raktima, what's your piece of advice for future participants?
Yeah, so my piece of advice would just be expanding on what you said, Mary. Lean into discomfort, but also uncertainty. That is something that I would say because, in like my experience of the hackathon, certain things went very differently from how I was expecting. And the only reason I was able to sort of bounce back from that and still submit a proposal on time that worked is because I was sort of open to the idea that things may go very, very differently from how you have planned, but you just need to quickly come up with a new plan and just bounce back. And this is not really hackathon like hackathon advice as much as it's also life advice that whenever you're working on a project together, even in the workplace, for example, when you're working with like three people, sometimes people are forced to drop off because of something that happened in their family, or you may fall sick, or like a lot of things happen that maybe you weren't completely expecting, or you're working with, say, a government deadline that suddenly gets pushed, and the government wants to sort of, at least that happens when you work with governments a lot, that they suddenly want to see you on Monday and it's already like a Saturday. So I think just being prepared for things to sort of change at the last moment and just bounce back and think of a new plan and not lose hope because things are not going exactly the way you had anticipated in your head. That would be my biggest advice for anyone who's participating in a policy hackathon. And also because I have been in these situations in sort of real life where we were helping companies like, come up with solutions to stuff like this on short notice. It also serves you really well when you are doing like the real life version of what we were trying to do in the policy hackathon. So yeah, that would be my concluding thought, just like lean into uncertainty.
So adaptability and resilience added to the list. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you so much to all three of you and all your teams and all the participants of the Policy Hackathon. I'm really inspired by your vision for the future, and I hope we will see your proposals implemented in life, and they will be taken into account when people are designing the future of the metaverse. Thank you so much for your time, and for all our listeners, stay tuned for the next edition of Foundry's Policy Hackathon. And in the meantime, have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Tech Policy Grind podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. I'm Rima Musa, and I'm the producer, editor, and host of the show, and want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our whole team at the Internet Law and Policy Foundry for making this podcast come to life, especially Lama Muhammad, our social coordinator, and Allison McReynolds, our accessibility coordinator.